Hi everyone. So in the last episode, we talked about how people do not know how to take in their achievement, to celebrate their promotion, or just take it all in before maybe looking for the next project to do. Yeah. And then how we said that childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences may be behind most of the passion projects or the milestone achievements that people have. So when you see people moving from one goal to another, even without taking it all in, sometimes is backed by maybe some pain or trauma that they are trying to avoid. So one of the questions we asked in the last episode was not what are you working toward, or not why are you working so hard, but then it's what are you working from? What are you using this work to escape from? So that was the discussions that really made rounds about the discussions in the last episode. So on this one, we're talking about the attachment theory and the love behind that passion, the love behind the drive, the love behind or the reason behind being overly driven. And we're bringing the second body of research, that backs up what we are saying in this couple of episodes, because this will add another dimension. If you've not watched the previous episode, you might have it might be difficult to understand this episode, but then you can still follow if you want. A British psychiatrist and psychoanalyst by name John Bowlby developed what we now call attachment theory. And this idea is, the thread or the rope that bonds the child and their early caregivers, because it shows that the bond formed between the child and their early caregivers, wherever they were, either parents, family members, or non-family members. And this bond creates an internal working model. It creates a blueprint in the mind of the child. It creates a set of embedded beliefs about whether the world is safe or whether relationships are reliable or necessary. And crucially, whether they themselves are stable enough to be worthy of love. So, what is trying to say that, okay, this relationship that the child and the early caregiver has created, toxic or not, it gives the child a blueprint of what should be when they go out. And it's why many people attract whatever it is they have at home. Most times when people have toxic relationships at home, or toxic parent, I'll call it out. Most times when people have toxic parents, they have a penchant, or what do they call it, to attract toxic people into their lives, toxic friends, toxic romantic relationships, toxic business partners, because that is what their nervous system is used to. And that's the blueprint that Bowlby was talking about in his work on attachment theory. Bowlby's work later expanded by researchers like Mary Ainsworth, and more recently, I think in the 2000s, by Sue Johnson. It tells us that children who experience insecure, that's what I just said, children who experience insecure attachment, where love felt conditional, love felt unpredictable or earned rather than freely given, those kind of children often develop what psychologists or psychoanalysts call anxious or avoidant patterns later in life. And here's what it connects directly to ambition. So for someone with an anxious attachment or an attachment history, achievement can become like a love substitute. Okay, I've done this now. In the child's mind, okay, I've done this now. Do you love me now? Even as an adult. Because if love in adulthood, in childhood felt like something you had to earn through good grades, through being helpful, either being helpful in toxicity or otherwise, through being exceptional, you are that child that is exceptional, through not causing trouble, or even through helping the toxic parents cause trouble. If love had to depend on what you can give, to the toxic caregiver at that point, then your nervous system learns a very specific an equation. It learns a very specific equation. Performance equals worth. It means if I'm not performing, then I'll become unworthy. Achievement equals safety. If I don't achieve that thing that my toxic caregiver has set for me, then I will not be safe with them. Stopping yourself from being that thing that they place for you, that, stopping would equal danger, because they've asked you to go for it, or they've asked you to do so. If you don't, then you'll be in danger. So you don't stop. You don't stop at all. You keep going. You keep climbing. You keep delivering. Not only because you want to, but because somewhere, somehow in your nervous system, resting felt like a threat, right? It felt like a threat. As a child growing up, it still feels like a threat. That's why some people cannot stay still. Say, someone stays a whole day without doing anything. They can't. A physician and trauma expert, Dr. Gabor, he's a trauma expert whose work on relationship between stress, trauma, and achievement is like one of the most important things done today. Put it this way, he said he describes what he calls the achievement trap, the pattern where driven people use external success to regulate an internal emotional state. See, I as I'm talking about this thing, I've seen a lot of this. I've seen it happen with me, but then I've seen it happen with someone that would go all out to do anything to get, that external success and bring it home. And then, just like a baby bringing you a toy that he has found, his missing toy that he has found, this adult will come and say, see, I've achieved this. Because that external success, is a means to regulate their emotional state. An emotional state that was never properly soothed in love during their childhood. It was never really loved. It was never really cuddled. It was never really nurtured. That's the word I'm looking for. It was never really nurtured in childhood. So that external success is what they yearn, is what they lean into. Dr. Gabor has written extensively about how they drive to achieve when it comes from this place is never satisfied. When your drive to achieve is coming from a place of trauma, whether you know it or not, there can never be satisfaction, because you always look for something to do to try to satisfy that, internal, that emotional burden you carried from childhood. Because it was never really about the achievement in the first place. It was not about the achievement in the first place. It was not about the grades. It was not about the milestone. It was something much more fundamental. It was the need to feel safe. It was the need to feel seen. It was the need to feel loved. It was the need to be enough. So let me share a bit about myself. This is where I can say these studies like really relate with me, and I decided to start this podcast. If you notice, I share a lot of my stories on my podcast because this is me and this is not just people's story. And I want to be honest with you about my own relationship with work, with studies, with learning. I think more was more about learning and trying to be the best. It was also with achieving, with the drive that has been both my greatest strength and for a long time, something I didn't fully understand, because I didn't fully understand why, if a particular phase of my life, my achievement life was ending, I was always looking for the next. What is the next? At a point, I'll have a nervous breakdown. I'm serious. I'll have a nervous breakdown if I couldn't think of the next thing to do after something was ending. Instead of looking for how to celebrate it, I'll be looking for, the next thing to do. What is that thing that I can lay my hands on? Immediately this phase passed. Now, I've always worked hard. And while that is a good thing, do you understand? It's driven by something I couldn't always name. Look, I didn't know, not that I didn't know, but I always knew that wherever I was coming from was toxic, but I didn't know how to name it. For most times when I talk to people about where I was coming from and whatever I was going through, or however my childhood stroke teenage years stroke early adult life were, because I'm African and we believe so much in witchcraft, most people be like, that's witchcraft, that's some black magic. And while I don't deviate from a place of from a place of spirituality, because I know that life as it is spiritual, I knew there was something more than just prayers. I knew there was something more than just deliverance. I knew there was something more than just pray for these people, because it was like the more you pray for these people, the worse they became. Because when you begin to pray for these people, in my own case, when I began to pray for these people, I began to let down my guard. The more I prayed for them, the more I loved them, emotionally, in their presence or in their absence, the more I loved them, of course, because I prayed for them. Do you understand? But then I knew there was something more. However, I couldn't put a name to it. So if you asked me what the problem was, I would just say, okay, yeah, I did this, they did this, they said this, they said this, they said this that lead to this and has led to this. But I couldn't, I'm sure the people I was talking to knew what I was trying to discuss, but then they couldn't, they didn't want to come out to tell me straight that, you needed to cut off this relationship. So there was always another qualification. There was always another goal. There was always another level to reach, which is good. But there could have been something more relaxing, something more human. And I'm not saying achieving things is not human, but then there could have been something more than just wanting to achieve something to be loved. Because this thing took me to a place where people started using me because they knew that, they probably knew that I was people pleasing, so I could do anything for them to like me. I could do anything for them to, be at peace with me. while they were taking advantage of me, for the longest time, I mistook that drive, that zeal, that love for passion. I mistook it for purpose. I mistook it for simply just being an ambitious person. And then the name Strong Woman came in. When people be like, oh, wow, you're a strong woman. You're doing this. You're having kids. You're doing that. You're doing that. You're being this. You're being that. You're a strong woman. I didn't know what the meaning of strong woman meant. And some of it was just genuinely that, you know. Some of it, and this took me years to see clearly, right, was just something else entirely. It wasn't passion. It wasn't purpose. It was a need to prove something. The need to prove that I could be something worthy in order to be loved. I remember after many years of being with some people, something happened, and then I got this statement, now you are part of the family. That is after I have sacrificed a lot. My name, my space, everything. People pleased, everything. Loved from a place of genuineness, everything. It was after like 9 years, 8, 9, that someone now said, now you're part of the family. Unfortunately, by that time, in my mind, I was already out of the family. So, yeah. But then all that wanting to do more, all that wanting to achieve that milestone, many times were not from a place of passion or trying to fulfill purpose. It was from a place of trying to prove something. Not to anyone in particular. That's the funny thing. You know, if he's trying to prove something to maybe that caregiver, that toxic caregiver, or those toxic people I met I attracted along the line, you know, it would have been different. This one is not to a particular person or institution or particular family, but to some internal judge that I had consciously chosen. That voice I couldn't silence in my head. That internal judge that will always say, you are only as good as what you produce. You are only as good as whatever you show me. That internal judge that followed one from childhood. That internal judge that said, rest is dangerous. That internal judge that said, if you stop moving, everything will fall apart. If you don't hold this and hold this and hold it and hold it all together, everything will scatter and it will be your fault. So I walked that pace, that unsustainable pace, that unrelenting pace, that, you know, trying to beat the allegation that I was not putting enough effort. For long, that my body eventually started sending me messages I could not ignore. You know, because you would have done it so much that your body will begin to tell you things. Right? You know, that strange headaches, that strange body pain, stomach ache, ulcer. You know, it's usually about pain. Because the other things that research tells us is that, and this connects back to adverse childhood experiences, right? And is that ACE study that found direct links between childhood adversity and adult physical health problems, which I've shared in previous videos. You can go back to earlier episodes of Rhoda 360 and listen and engage with it too. That wound doesn't just live in your psychology, doesn't just live in your head. It lives in your body. It lives as brain fog. It lives as migraine. It lives as eye diseases. It lives as chronic stress in the body, chronic pain. The chronic stress of never being enough, it lives as sickness in different parts of the body. The constant state of low-grade emergency, that high achievers often operate in, is because as a child, you had to walk on eggshells. That inability to rest, to receive, to celebrate, the inability to land anywhere, the inability to actually tell yourself, well done. It has a physiological cost too. It's not just about mental health issues. And I paid some of that cost. I paid some of that cost because it was in paying those costs that I started asking a different question. I started looking at myself. I looked at my kids and said, this is how it's going to continue. Not how do I achieve more, but what am I actually doing this for? Why am I doing this? Why have I been chosen to carry this body? And the answer, when I was honest enough to sit with it and answer myself, it was more complicated than I expected. I couldn't even answer myself. It was like, what do I say now? What do I do now? I'm going to stop this video here, and I'll continue in the next episode. And that next episode will be talking about, we'll complete this story, and then we'll talk about what wound-driven ambition looks like. Please subscribe, follow me, engage these videos and this podcast so that our community will continue to grow. Please leave your comment in the comment section so that with any questions you have, and then we can address such questions from there. If you are able to DM me on Instagram on Rhoda360 _pod, POD, please do, and I can also answer your questions from there. I can't wait to see you on the other side of greatness. See you in the next episode. Bye.